podcast role. Welcome in.
You're listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. Hello, Jamie. Oh, I didn't say we are a proud member of the Podcast Roll Network, because we are. How you doing, Jamie?
Hey.
Well, hello.
Are you in Boston now? Where were you going to Boston?
No, New York.
Oh, New York.
Yeah, I got picked up this morning at 3:45 in the morning in Florida, and I took JetBlue up. My JetBlue flight really, I don't mean this, it's going to come across as rude, but it seemed like a city bus because no one had luggage. It just was, people got on, they flew up to New York, and they got off. I was like, does anyone have luggage?
Are they taking it for work? Do they fly
Probably.
from Florida for the day?
I'm guessing they came up early for work.
Yeah, the day. You go and
It
work.
literally felt like public transit, but it was a 3-hour flight.
Catch the 7 o'clock or the 6 o'clock home.
It was a 6 a.m. flight, and I'm sure they'll catch, 12 hours later. I mean, literally no one had luggage. I was like, and the best was the flight attendant said to me, oh, listen, you've got your winter jacket, and we have a policy. You can only put your winter jacket up at the end to make sure that there's space. I said, no problem. She says, you could probably just put it on top of your backpack, because I just travel with a backpack. So I jammed it in front of my backpack. And then I'm in an aisle. So when the thing goes to get off the plane, I jump up and I open up the thing. My bag's the only thing in there. Well, I was like,
That's rare, man.
I mean, it was really bizarre. It was really bizarre.
But that's probably so normal for some folks, right? It's just how they,
I guess.
they commute. There was once I was on a project in Salt Lake City for a massive OCR complaint, working with Davis Schools, which is a suburb of Salt Lake. And because the flight for us for the Bay is like maybe an hour 10, an hour 15 or something like that, there were multiple days I just went for the day. And the only thing I did was I just put different shoes in my backpack. I got a bigger backpack and I just put different shoes in my backpack so that I could have more comfortable shoes flying home after the day of dress shoes or whatever, work shoes all day.
Excuse me, you cannot put your shoes up here until you've put all the bags out. It's empty. There's nothing.
Yeah. I got it. In some ways, I was like, this isn't terrible. I slept in my bed last night and I will sleep in my bed tonight.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. Yeah,
I don't have
There's
to
just
say,
the issue of getting to the airport and doing all that kind of nonsense.
That's such a hassle. It is.
Yeah. The guy next to me clapped. I thought it was like the 1980s when we would all clap when we landed.
He clapped when.
Yeah. I was like, what? It's so.
Well, I don't know.
I'm telling you, man.
Everybody remembers the doors are flying off on Alaska Airlines. So
I know this is just
clapping so that's not totally inappropriate.
It's so true.
You're still
I just
alive.
was like, what is happening? So anyway, here's what I'm thinking.
Whatever this transition is, it's not going to be that. Go on.
Rude. I would say, all right, so listen, I'm on a plane. It's got to be fully fueled to get to its destination. I'm thinking about our guest today, or our guest this week, Kaaren Andrews.
Yeah.
And you can't get to graduation unless you are fully fueled and ready to go and fully equipped in 9th grade. Like that 9th grade year is so important. Okay, I agree with you.
Nicely done.
No, not smooth as silk. And for those who watch the video, your face is, what the? But I do. I mean, what interesting work, right? Isn't her work is so interesting.
Oh, God, what a great example. This interview with Kaaren there were so many things I loved about it. And then it was one of those where I'm like, bust from our structure, that listening to you run this normal structure of the thing. I'm like, oh, she doesn't fit this structure all that well, in that I really want to hear what she's learned in relation to the other things that people say make the big difference for kids to stay on graduation rate, not just 9th grade, because her data was just so.
Oh my gosh. When a student is on track in 9th grade, they're 3 to 4 times more likely to graduate from high school.
Regardless of poverty, regardless of race. My jaw was on the ground.
Mine too.
And so I was like, oh, can I ask about what she's learned around K-3 literacy in relation to that? How do they think about whole system change? I know they're focused on 9th grade, but if a kid is literate, she's talking about really successful 8th graders falling off. And I'm like, that's so interesting, because my whole mindset has been K-3, or really pre-K-3, being so important. And I'm not indicating that it's not very important for making sure that kids are on grade level. And once they're on grade level, they're good to go. What I didn't ever consider is a drop off after 8th grade. What the heck just happened?
Yeah.
So
well, that's interesting. Although I'll tell you, and people will hear the conversation in a minute here, I did really appreciate, maybe selfishly, just in terms of when we work with school districts or as a school leader, at what point are you able to take on the work yourself, kind of thing. And so her conversation about, the after action review was, and I agree with you, I probably should have just been mining more of her wisdom around these different benchmarks and these different points in time along a student's journey. And what are we learning? What do we know? And while her focus, and it's so focused on ninth grade, you have to be thoughtful. And we use the Desmond Tutu phrase at some point around, got to find out why people keep falling into the river instead of just keep pulling them out. And so, yeah, it was super fun. I really enjoyed it.
I did too. I really enjoyed it. And I've got tons to talk about. So, I mean,
okay.
Can we do one more opener here? You guys were talking about who you were and what you thought was cool. And I thought it was really fun to hear the two of you talk about that.
I did think about asking you that.
Well, what it made me think of, because you talked about getting the Beastie Boys and James Taylor CDs for your bar mitzvah. I'm like, who was Peter Stiepelman at his bar mitzvah at 13? What kind of kid was this boy?
The biggest, nerdiest kid. I mean, not only that, like, he had all these kids on Long Island who would have these themed bar mitzvahs. And meanwhile, mine was like in the backyard under a tent. And my mother hired a mime. And your reaction is everyone's reaction when I'm like, so this one kid, Eric Lerner, he had the New York Islanders. This kid, Seth Weinger, he had the Mets. And Hojo came and gave him a bat and told him it wasn't corked. I had a mime who, like, the kids were like kicking in the pants. And then he would be like, whoa, oh my God.
What on earth? It is absolutely genius.
So that kind of tells you what on earth, who I've become.
Oh, my Lord. I love that story. What a wonderful story. I love it.
With a DJ and a really overactive smoke machine. So that poor mime was like gagging. And
that's what I wanted to ask. I wanted to ask what the quick glimpse into a 13-year-old.
You want to improve graduation rate? Have a bar mitzvah with a mime. You'll study very hard to get out of town.
Gosh, that is hilarious. Let's go on.
Well, but everyone is talking about graduation rates. And so I do want to remember our sponsor today.
Yes.
In the conversation with Kaaren Andrews, we really got real about what actually, like where it actually starts, ninth grade. And so she shared that students who are on track, as I mentioned in our conversation earlier, like 3 to 4 times more likely to graduate. And that means that the work isn't about last minute fixes. It's about seeing students early and supporting them when it matters most. So that's why we love IXL. It gives teachers real-time insights, personalized learning tools, and that's one platform, clear data, supporting every learner. So if you want progress over perfection and results that last, check out IXL.com/imperfect to learn more. Are we ready to go in?
We are ready to go in. Let's go listen to Kaaren.
You're listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. I'm Peter Stiepelman.
And I'm Jamie Manzan.
We will see you on the other side. Today on An Imperfect Leader, Kaaren Andrews is my guest. And Kaaren is the National Director of the Center for High School Success. She's a longtime public school leader and an advocate for equity who has dedicated over 2 decades to supporting vulnerable youth. And most importantly, and I picked this right from her website, in 9th grade, she loved sports and thought she had great style. Kaaren, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Thank you. And thank you for emphasizing the thought part, because it definitely was not that I had good style. I will show you a picture of myself.
Oh my gosh, I love it. For those who, if you know, on YouTube, that we do show a video of this conversation. So if you'd like to see, wow.
I look like Mike D and the Beastie Boys or something.
I was going to say,
that time.
Those are my people from Brooklyn.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, it wasn't good style, but I was very confident in it.
Amazing. In 1988, for my bar mitzvah, I got 2 CDs for my bar mitzvah. The CDs were pretty new. And I had a Beastie Boys and James Taylor. So that really showed you.
That's
I don't know.
incredible range.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking back to how I would have completed that statement. I would say probably in 9th grade, I loved music. And I knew I had no style. I had this like members only jacket that I felt so cool. Boy.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, man. All right. For those who don't know you or the organization that you lead, they might not understand why we're talking about ninth grade so much. So let's bring them in. You're leading an organization that partners with nearly 200 high schools across the country, and it's especially focused on ninth grade success. So would you talk a little bit about the Center for High School Success and then maybe share what that model or that approach looks like in practice?
Yeah, of course. So what we do at the Center for High School Success is, like you said, we partner with high schools and districts across the country to drastically improve ninth grade on-track rates in service of really drastically improving graduation rates. Because when a student is on track in ninth grade, they are 3 to 4 times more likely to graduate from high school. And so when a student's on track, what I mean when I say that is they pass a quarter of the classes needed to graduate, a quarter of the credits needed to graduate, and they have no more than 1 F. And it is the single strongest predictor of who graduates high school, more so than race, economic status, mobility, 8th grade test scores, and prior academic performance combined. And all those things are things we can't control. And so the power and beauty of focusing on ninth grade and making sure that every kid is on track at the end of ninth grade is that it's something that's within our control as educators and as high school. But what's hard about it is that high schools aren't designed to do that, right? High schools are designed almost for disconnection, not connection, right? We have really big places where kids are with a different group of kids 6 to 8 times across the day. Teachers see 150 different kids across their day. They don't share kids necessarily with any other teachers. What we do is we try to we put systems in place in high schools so that kids are seen and known. Think about like elementary school, right? Like a teacher sees the kid when they come in the morning, what they're like first.
Right. Greet them at the door, high five or a hug, right? And then have a little class circle as a way to circle up. And,
you know them. You know what they're like as a reader, that they struggle in math or they love math, that they do really well after lunch after they've had that recess break. They love PE. Their parents
know if they're in a school play or they're on a baseball team. And so you go to their games because for 20 to 25 kids, that's manageable.
Yes, it's manageable.
Yeah.
And so then as they get to high school, it's exactly the opposite. A teacher is focused on what happens in their class and their content. Content is king, right? So what we do is we put ninth grade success teams together, and we work with schools and districts to design master schedules that allow for cohorting of kids in big schools, right? Or there are a lot of other ways to do it, but really getting teams of teachers that share the same kids, meeting regularly and looking at data and so we're going to start looking at kids who are failing 1 to 2 classes and attending 80% of the time. So they're there 4 days a week. They're seeing success in the majority of their classes, but they're failing 1 or 2. And I, as the teacher of the class they're failing, assumes usually that they're probably failing all their classes if they're failing mine. But that's actually not true for a lot of kids, a huge swath of kids. So what these teams do, they get together, they use a protocol, they identify this group of kids that I talk about. They look at the strengths, what's working for these kids in the classes.
Appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry. Love it.
Yes, what's happening? And then how can we use that to assign a quick intervention or support for that kid that happens in the next week and a half that gets them back on track? So it could be, and that requires us also to get at what's the root cause. Because often we'll say they're failing math, assign them to after-school tutoring. Well, if they're failing math, it might not be because of a skill issue. It might be because they're half an hour late every day because they're dropping off their little brother at school. It could be that they're really disorganized. They're doing the work, but their papers are all piled up in their backpack and they're just not organized in that way. So that's the work that we do. It's really mindset. That's where teachers start to see, wait a minute, there are things within my control that I can do. And we can know our kids. Like we can actually know these ninth graders as they come in. We can know their families. We can actually create that environment where everyone belongs. So that's a huge piece of what we do.
No, I really appreciate you describing it. I did a little bit of a deep dive on your website, which has so many wonderful components. And one was a video I saw that also leverages the power of peers. And I thought that was
Yeah.
really important. This isn't just adult driven. This is a community driven in terms of the school community involving older students, really
Yeah.
paving the way and creating that cultural field where students feel valued and honored by their peers, not just by the adults
Yes.
in that space.
Yes.
I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I can give a couple examples. I think the video you're talking about is probably Camelback High School in Phoenix.
That's
and
right.
Camelback uses junior and senior leaders in really doing the entire orientation a week before school starts. And they're the ones who really introduce the ninth graders to this school. Then those kids stay involved. They have systems set up where they come into their advisory classes, their seminar, ninth grade seminar classes, and they actually support in teaching lessons.
I think it's marvelous.
They sit and they help with even skill-based tutoring, organization, all those pieces. And then another really good example, I think, is another school in Phoenix, Cesar Chavez High School. They actually use 10th graders with the ninth graders, and they don't pick the highest achieving 10th graders that are doing everything right. They choose the ones that sort of struggled in ninth grade. And they work with them to say, what have you learned?
Gotcha. Like the
teach
old
them
adage,
those-
this guy's in a hole and he's stuck and this guy jumps into the hole with him and he says, why in the hole with me? He goes, yeah, I've been in this hole before and I know the way out. Like,
Yes.
I'm not
exactly.
gonna be the kid who's everything comes so easy and then I'm gonna say I'm gonna tutor you, but rather the
Yeah,
kid who
exactly.
has had that productive struggle and has figured it out.
Yep. I've been in a class where the 10th graders they're assigned to a seminar class, and they came in and they said, like, they would say stuff, a teacher would be teaching this lesson about a lesson on organization. And they'd say, or on advocacy, actually, the one I was in, self-advocacy. And they'd say, look, here's the thing. These teachers look intimidating. They look like maybe they don't have time. They do. And they want you to come talk to them. So you just have to be brave. When they say it, when the teacher's saying it, the kids are looking around, not really locked in on it. The kids start saying it, the cool 10th grader. And all of a sudden the kids are like, oh, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do. So yeah, it builds these relationships where they can really go to these kids when they have struggles and they have challenges.
And when they walk through the halls and see each other, there not this fear of the unknown. I love, so wonderful. Our guest today is Kaaren Andrews, the National Director of the Center for High School Success. And Kaaren, in the leadership model that I use to advise others, there's a dimension. It's called collective aspiration. And inside that dimension, there's a term, moral focus. And I think moral focus really speaks to an individual's personal values as well as the organizational values as well. And you've always been focused on addressing systemic inequities that affect the most vulnerable students. And you've spent over 2 decades, as we mentioned before, working with students who've been underserved, including building an alternative high school program, for which I'd really like to know more about that. I think it's obviously really clear that your moral focus is secure. I'm curious about how have those experiences shaped your belief in public schools as this force for social change? And how does that perspective guide your leadership at your organization?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I actually thought I would never leave the principalship, and that it was my favorite job. I felt incredibly effective in that role, especially running the alternative high schools in Seattle. And I loved the fact that we could take kids coming in who felt like school was not for them and that they wouldn't be able to graduate, and we could turn that thinking around. We could give them what they needed, personalized an experience for them that led to an outcome that they wanted. So it was a true
alternative,
Yes.
as opposed to, well, you
Yes.
were unsuccessful in this comprehensive high school until you're 21. Well, you'll just go over there.
Yeah, we'll just hold you over here.
Yeah.
and
you can,
do the
and
same
we'll
thing
tell you
over
that the
again.
teachers you'll have there also were the ones that were unsuccessful. I mean, that
Right.
was the alternative high school that my predecessor inherited, and God bless him, Chris Belcher really rethought that in Columbia, Missouri, and found the most amazing principal, Dr. Neville, and she had the authority to hire the most amazing teachers. And so what a true alternative. It's like a boutique high school now for those who just were not being successful in a comprehensive high school and really needed a true alternative.
Yep. I mean, I think actually alternative schools are the bellwether for the school system that they're in, right? If they're well-funded and they have the ability to do things like hire the best teachers, like you said, it shows a value. It shows a value of all kids, right? And if you don't, if the alternative school is in an old building with a sinking floor, leaking ceilings, and the teachers that aren't doing well get moved in place there, that says a lot about what the school system thinks about kids who struggle, who need some different supports, right?
And the community as a whole. If a school board, which is elected by its local community, also believes that's okay, then that really is sending a message about who's valued in this community.
And I think one of the things, so when I went to the alternative high school system, I went from a K-8 school in the Madrona neighborhood, a school that was largely African-American and really historically connected to the neighborhood. It was a really important school in the Black community in Seattle. It was called Madrona K-8. It was a beautiful place in a very seriously gentrifying neighborhood. And what was happening, what I was seeing, our kids were doing really well academically, state tests, all that stuff. They would go on to high school, and I was seeing them disappear out of high school in 10th, 11th grade. And it was heartbreaking. And so when given an opportunity to do something different, I decided to go to the alternative high school and try to get these kids back in school and figure out what was going on. Like, it's a place where you have a lot more creative space to try out things. And so when I started there were about 200 kids involved in that school. Over the course of the next 9 years, when I was leading that school, there were a few different campuses at the time when I started. When I left, there were 11 campuses, and we were serving over 2,000 kids a year. So what ended up happening is we became the biggest high school in Seattle if you put together all of the different campuses, right? We were taking in 20 to 50 new kids every week across the school year and listening to them. So what we did is we had a week-long intake orientation process where we really looked at and talked to the kids. What works for you? What doesn't work for you? What are your academic levels? What are the barriers? What are the things that you need to have removed for you to come to school, for you to be successful? And then we assigned them to a campus that was most aligned with what it is that they needed. And over time, this went really well. But over time, what we really needed, talk about the bellwether part, was for the district to look at what's happening. Why is it that we have this many kids funneling out of the system?
I mean, as you were talking, I was just thinking of the Desmond Tutu quote of, we have to stop pulling people out of the river and find out why they keep falling in.
Exactly. And I knew why they were falling in. That's the thing.
This is really exemplifying that quote. That sort
exactly.
Of added, yeah.
And so I knew, because I had all of this data, but nobody really wanted it, right? Like, it was not data that they were ready to act on at the time. So at a certain point, I started feeling like I am enabling this great push out in schools, right? And it wasn't that people wanted to do that. It was that the schools weren't set up to support the needs of the kids, a lot of them.
Yeah,
and
the systems thinking language, the system structure dictates its behaviors. So the behaviors are absolutely established by the structures that have been put into place. And so
exactly. Yes.
Yeah, wow.
And so then I met Jonah Edelman, who worked at Stand for Children. He was the CEO and founder of Stand for Children, and he was starting this work on ninth grade success. I had coffee with him at Mio Posto right down the road, and he told me about all the research on ninth grade, and I was so deeply committed to my school and all the work we were doing. I had a hard time at first, like, grasping that this was something I could and should do. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, like, this is exactly what I need to do, because schools can put the systems together to create a way that every kid is seen, and interventions happen quickly and early, all the things that I was talking about with what we do with high schools. But it was hard for me to at first envision that was possible, because it wasn't really what I was seeing. But in terms of,
it wasn't what you're experiencing, although my original question, for which I'm responsible for moving us off of it, I'm just going to bring us back for one quick second, which is, so how did your experiences inform the leadership work that you do now? And it seems abundantly clear that you were looking for an opportunity to put into place the things that you knew would work. And if it wasn't going to exist in your current situation, you were going to look for those schools, now more than 200, that were willing to stitch their mission to yours and do the right thing for kids.
Yes. So, like, basically carrying the Desmond Tutu metaphor forward, it's like going upriver, knowing now that we can stop the children from falling into the river, and we can put those systems in place. And more, it doesn't mean that alternative schools don't have a place, but they don't need to be for that many kids. They should be very much for kids who need a different way of learning, different level of support, a tier 3 wraparound kind of situation. And all kids don't need that. I mean, so it was a really tremendous challenge and opportunity for me to step into this and to jump into these high schools and really talk to high school leaders of comprehensive schools and see how much they wanted and want still in Seattle as well. I mean, all over the country. Everyone wants to do right by kids, but we have these systems that don't necessarily support.
Yes. And now
connection.
you get to be their thought partner in seeing a different way. And seeing it differently.
Exactly. And it's so cool because it works everywhere. This 9th grade, this focus on creating belonging, seeing kids, it works everywhere. And it works in rural schools, urban schools, suburban schools. It works. We see really strong results with multilingual learners, kids with IEPs, across huge gains across different racial groups. It's actually amazing to have something that it's not like this big innovative thing. It's just a different way of thinking and approaching
which is
the work.
In some ways what we need right now in some times, not all times, because I think it's unfair. I think public schools are being beaten up for not being innovative. And I think that they truly are. And so here's another way. And I hadn't remembered that I met you through Jonah, that he and I had this email and he said, you need to meet Kaaren. And so now I understand that for him, it's going phone free and 9th grade and 9th grade. So these seem to be two very promising practices. I want to ask you a question that I ask every guest who comes on our program. How does the term an imperfect leader resonate with you?
Well, I have this little sign on my wall that says progress over perfection. I've had it forever, and it's really a mantra for me. But it's funny because I was telling my daughter who just started 9th grade last week that I was going on this podcast, and she said, what's it called? And I said, An Imperfect Leader. And she said, sounds perfect for you. And it's funny because she was trying to take a shot at me, which is funny. And I actually think, is there a perfect leader? I don't know. I mean, it's redundant in a way, but I like the fact that you're calling out that we shouldn't strive to be perfect. I actually never have. And I know that anyone who knows me will laugh when they hear that, because it's like, it's really true. Like, I am all about, I don't think you can try out new things if you're worried about being perfect. I don't think you can make a big decision to take a risk, which you have to do to grow if you are worried about being perceived as perfect, because there is really no perfect. But it's about worry about how others will think about you and see you.
So I want to talk a minute about the Mosaic Project. It is one of our favorite organizations and has over 25 years of experience empowering students to really celebrate differences, communicate assertively, and resolve conflict peacefully at their outdoor school. I happen to have experience being part of the Mosaic Project, and so I can absolutely tell you it's an amazing organization. Their innovative SEL curriculum is now available to our Imperfect Leader audience. And so you can get a 10% discount through their new documentary film-based Mosaic Classroom Project. So just let the people know during your onboarding process to receive that 10% discount is to just mention An Imperfect Leader. Learn more about the Mosaic Project at mosaicproject.org.
This is Greg Meyer, Jamie's partner at APC Leadership Collaborative. Superintendents know that school principals are the single biggest lever that any school district has for improving student joy and success. Unfortunately, there's very little professional development for the specific things that a principal has to do to improve their school. At APC Leadership Collaborative, we specialize in coaching principals to take on audacious goals, build their leadership skills, and make big improvements in their school. If that inspires you, let's connect and talk about how we can collaborate. Find APC Leadership Collaborative online at apccolab.com.
When leaders think in systems, they think differently. They see the big picture, making decisions that create coherence and strengthen communication across their teams. They build adaptability, flexibility, and engagement. Every day, school leaders face complex challenges, from student engagement to staff alignment. What if your team could see those challenges as part of a bigger picture? That's what happens when you think in systems. It's how leaders turn complexity into connection and challenges into opportunities for growth. At the Waters Center for Systems Thinking, we help educators and organizations build this capacity, developing the habits and tools that turn vision into action. Think differently, think in systems. Sign up for our webinars, free resources, or a consultation by visiting our website, which you can find in the show notes.
We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. And my guest today is Kaaren Andrews, the National Director of the Center for High School Success. Now, in this segment, like every week, we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision, and then we discuss it. So, what happened?
Well, I think it's interesting being in this role. If you asked me that question when I was a principal in a building, I could come up with so many decisions that I made that had unintended consequences that I wish I had done something different. It's really different. I always say there are no ninth grade success emergencies. It's not something where I'm in reactive mode almost ever. So it's a really different role. It's actually, I had to regrow my prefrontal cortex, I think, to be able to really sit and think and plan and execute the plan. I think when I thought about this question and listened to other of your guests talk about it, it's a little different for me. I think what happened for me is at the end of every year, every school year, where we meet with our district and school level leader partners, and we talk about what went well. We share the data. We talk about things, next steps, and what we would plan to do the next year. And it's a renewal meeting for contracts. And a couple of years ago, even though we had really strong results in terms of raising ninth grade on-track rates, we were finding that some districts were saying, we're not actually going to renew. And it was shocking to us because we had exceeded the expectations in terms of getting the results that we said we would get. We had really strong buy-in and support from the building leaders. And so it was a moment where I realized we had done something wrong, that I had not led us to a place that was right, that was going to take us to where we needed to be, because we needed to be with these schools for up to 4 years in this real clear foundational partnership to really embed these practices, shift mindsets, make sure the practices continue.
Absolutely. And think about the churn of principals. And so when that leader is replaced, how does the new person come in and understand what you're doing and why you're doing it and to honor it? I spoke with a superintendent from Texas recently who had such a great phrase. I'd never heard this before, and I loved it. Maybe it's very Texas, but she said, you don't move the fences until you know why they were put in. And I said, oh, I love that.
I love that.
But now
too.
with
That's
a very
really
Texas drawl that I would never try to impersonate someone from Texas. But it was it was so perfect. Man.
No, it's really true. And so what I realized in reflecting on that is the mistake was we thought our mental model for success was, okay, you implement an evidence-based practice, ninth grade success framework, our roadmap for ninth grade success. You do that. You identify it, you do that. You have strong implementation. So you have this evidence-based practice. You have strong implementation. You get strong results. That's enough, right? That's what's going to lead to the next thing. But what I was missing was actually, as funding becomes scarce, which we are in that place right now, and as hard decisions have to be made, positions are getting cut, there's a lot, ESSER funds, the ESSER cliff happened, there's no more kind of that discretionary money. We actually had to do more than that. We had to show people really a return, like a return on investment. What is it that they're getting that's going to be a sustainable thing? Because it's not that it wasn't enough for them. It wasn't that they weren't happy with the results. It's that there's so much competition for scarce resources. So when we started looking at it, I had a conversation with a superintendent in the Midwest, which I won't say specifically, but of a prominent district. And she said, the reason I know that I need to continue this is because I was able to cut, not keep all of these credit recovery teachers that I had, that we have these kids that are coming up that don't need credit recovery.
So if I
Right?
were to just go back to what happened, and I'm going to use that example from the Midwest, I think to fuel what I think I understand to be true. So here is your model. You're working in 200 schools, and you're being wildly successful. And as part of that success, schools begin to think about their budget reductions that are happening at the local, state, and federal levels. Certainly the pandemic monies went away. So now they're being told to look internally about what they can cut. And they're likely hearing someone say, why do we need them? We can do it ourselves, right? That's often what they say. We know how to build relationships with kids. Maybe we need to get jump started, but now we know how to do that. Or it's helpful that we've put together teams of students to support their peers. So we can have somebody run that. That's not a problem. We can figure that out. And okay, I having been there, whether it be equal opportunity schools, even to some extent the Minority Student Achievement Network, or at some point someone said, we don't need AVID, we can just do it, all those kinds of things. And these are support systems that really do support the schools. And I have been the victim of falling prey to someone saying we can do it ourselves. And I've also pushed back to some extent on others to say, no, we must keep it. So what I think I heard you say that got overlooked was we were being successful. What we were not doing, what got overlooked, was being able to demonstrate what they get when we're their partner and these things are present. So the Midwest example of, well, we may get this relationship with the organization. We may get the opportunity to put in programs that will accelerate children's learning as opposed to remediating what they miss, kind of thing. So we don't need credit recovery because now we can do credit advancement, these other types of things that perhaps we hadn't done. Am I capturing?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And by keeping, so 90% of kids who are on track in ninth grade graduate high school. So if you increase your on track rate by 3 to 4 percentage points, right, in 1 year, that means like if you're you have 1,400 ninth graders in your district. Maybe this is too obscure, but you have 1,400 ninth graders in your district. You increase that by 4 percentage points. The next year, that means you have 56 more kids on track, right? That means 50 more graduates from high school in that cohort. So what that generates across the 4 years is a lot of per student funding when those kids stay in school and all the way through graduation.
Yes, you're speaking to the fact that they're not dropping out, not just that they're staying on track, but what percentage of them give up, disappear?
Yes.
And your funding is tied to their attendance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest chunk of return in terms of the financial return. And then it's the reduction in the need for credit recovery options, right? So whether that's paying for online credit recovery partnership with one of the online providers, whether that's having a teacher or multiple teachers that are teaching and filling in those gaps, whether it's a reduction in the need for summer classes or evening classes, or however they do that, it's a reduction in the need for that. So basically, we were able to quantify now by looking at what it costs in a state to what school districts get in a state for educating a kid when they come to school, and the cost of FTE for credit recovery, and to quantify that. And basically, our return on investment, our fee for service, because that's how we operate as a nonprofit, it's an 8 to 9 times return on investment for doing the work with us. So it's like a both and. So you get these results and you have these outcomes of more kids graduating, more kids actually also able to access your CTE programs, your college and career pathways, your dual credit, right? Because they're not having to take other classes to make up for it. They have room in their schedule. They have the skills, the confidence, the belief that they belong at school as they go forward. So they're able to access those programs, and then they're also on track to have a connected college or career after they actually graduate. But then there's also, so you have all of that, and then you also have the actual financial return that you can reinvest some of those dollars back into whatever it is that you're working on, or other holes or things that you identify through a lot of this data work that we do with them as well.
What have you learned about relationships, or what did you learn about relationships as you've been exploring and navigating this? What new relationships were formed?
Yeah.
I know that I send you the questions in advance, so I suspect that you've been thinking about the relationship piece.
Yeah, the relationships are the best part of the work, really. I have built some relationships with superintendents that have been really incredible. I've learned so much, and having the return on investment kind of conversations and having these, we've built in a lot more intentional communication with decision makers at the leadership level, at the district leadership level as we go, because we also know how important the district leaders are in terms of removing barriers, creating the structures system-wide that keep things, like you said, the turnover. That's massive problem, especially when the work that we're doing, so much of it is mindset shift, right? There's also, there's the structures, there's the cohorting of kids, there's looking at feeder patterns, middle school to high school, and getting into the 8th grade classes and talking to parents. There are systems and structures. There also are, there's a shift. Once you know that high school can be different and these are the ways it's different, you don't really go back. You're not going to ever be able to really go back to the way it was. And building the relationships with these superintendents and learning and seeing, they're the ones who've shown me and taught me the connections between the work that they're doing on like dual credit or Birmingham Promise or different scholarship programs for kids, and how this work actually really supports all of that. They're working on MTSS, and this actually is MTSS in the high school. And they show me this is where we're struggling. The high school folks say they can't do MTSS. They don't have the structures, and this is MTSS. And we're doing that in 9th grade. Then they want to build a 10th grade team in 11th grade, 12th grade. And you see this sort of shifts. So I have learned a tremendous amount from superintendents. I can call out specifically the superintendent, Tia Andrade in Phoenix Union, who would be a wonderful guest. But she's just a courageous, strong leader.
Great.
The first woman to be a superintendent there.
Is that right, in Phoenix?
Yep.
Wow. Well, her neighbor is Scott Menzel in Scottsdale, and Scott is a dear friend, and so and he listens each week. So shout out, Scott. Go meet your neighbor if you haven't already. Although I suspect they know each other.
Yeah, I suspect so too. Yeah. But she has been. She had her executive team go and sit and follow a 9th grader, just a random 9th grade schedule, and sit with that 9th grader through the whole day to see what their day was like and to see what the experience was like. And she tells really funny stories about how to run the
how
mile.
long you have to sit.
To run the mile. To run the mile was really
went on
something.
the mile day? Terrible.
Yes. And then, just how much sit and get there was and how little interaction and connection. And it changed everything. But it opened the doors to them really connecting with us and building authentic relationships.
I wonder if they would
district-wide.
also substitute teach sometime. Following the kid is one important piece, and then substitute teaching and seeing the teacher side of it. That was probably the most valuable thing for me as a superintendent. Was each semester I would either substitute in an elementary school classroom, since that's my background, or I would teach middle school Spanish, which was, there's a special place in heaven for middle school world language teachers.
Yes, there truly is. You're right. You're right.
All right, let me ask you a last question as we conclude. And I'm thinking about this last question in the sense that you've been a district leader, you've been a building leader of an alternative high school, although 2,000 students or 1,400 kids all across the city makes you a district-wide leader. And so I'm curious, as well as in this work that you're doing right now, supporting school districts, what advice would you give to an aspiring leader?
I think I would say really stay open to looking at data that doesn't tell you what you want to see. Look at the data. You talk a lot about the human-centered approach, and we do a lot with that. As we grow the 9th grade success teams over time, we have them talk to kids, really use the empathy interview protocols, and really listen to kids about their experience. And I think that as a leader, that is some of the hardest thing to do, because we want to believe, because everything we do is with the intent that it's right for kids, but actually listen to the voices, talk to the kids who are not seeing success, and stay open to what you can learn from them and what that says about all kids and the experiences that you see in your schools. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Try things. Don't just be a person who goes through and does things the way they've been done. Challenge.
I love it.
Challenge. Yeah.
That is great advice. Our guest today was Kaaren Andrews, the National Director of the Center for High School Success. And Kaaren, one of our goals in our school district was that children would make successful transitions into middle school and then out of middle school into high school. And I wish I had known you when we were working on that into high school piece, because I know that while we saw good success and an increase in graduation rates and things like that, there probably were so many pieces that we were missing in terms of valuing and honoring children that we probably could have learned from you. So I hope that others will take advantage of you and your organization and take advantage of this podcast as just a good example of good people doing great things. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. I said this at the opening, but I'm going to say it again. I love this. I personally just want to talk to her. I think it was such
what's really nice is that you're coming up to Seattle in a little bit, and she lives in the next neighborhood over than from where you're going to be. And I think we should try to all get together, and then you come back to Bainbridge. But anyway, yes, I do want to spend more time with her.
I want to start with this question that she framed, and you both vibed with it. You both were like, yeah, that's true. But in your mind, former superintendent, why are alternative high schools the bellwether? She called them the bellwether for the success of a system. Why that? Why alternative high schools?
Oh, I think it's so interesting because way too often alternative high schools have been a way of complying with the law of being required to educate a child until 21 or 25. And yet they are not that interested in doing whatever it takes for that child. And so they create an alternative high school that says, whether it's because of behavior or because of past low performance, you'll get to go here and we'll check the box of fulfilling our obligation until you drop out or you get a diploma from this school. Also, if we're putting our most at-risk kids there, we often put our least qualified teachers there. So the person who got into trouble, had really low performance, but there was no documentation on that person. And so they have to have a spot. And so they put them there at the alternative high school. And so in the conversation, you heard me talk a little bit about how that was the case until my predecessor came in and said, oh, no, we're not going to do that here. And just reconstituted the school, brought in a tremendous leader in Erica Neville. And really, I think I referred to it as a boutique high school, like created a boutique high school there. And the graduation rate is incredible. They themselves have received a number of accolades for the kind of curriculum building that they've done and the deep work that they do. And they make it really relevant. They have so many different engagements with local university in terms of doing deep learning there. And so I think that's what she means by a bellwether, in that how you treat the alternative high school speaks volumes for how you treat all kids within your school district.
All right. So that part I feel like that was a great. It restated what you guys talked about. And I think it's a clear restatement of that.
Isn't this a coaching moment where he's like, yeah, but you didn't answer my question. But I think
I want to point out something.
Okay.
She created an amazing boutique alternative high school in Seattle. Spectacular, serving tons of students, and realized very quickly that the system hadn't changed and she was actually causing this.
Yes.
So you've created now this boutique high school in Missouri, in Columbia. To what degree have the traditional high schools adapted or changed because of your bellwether school?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that initially there was such resistance and, well, she doesn't take all the kids and she doesn't have to do what we have to do. We have different challenges. And so there was real resistance to changing. They wanted the traditional model of this kid's struggling here. There should be a place for that kid. And it should be that high school, that alternative high school.
Right.
And so
I would argue that Kaaren was probably in the same place. Kaaren is probably a position where she's, I'm smart and I know how to, like, she was doing it over multiple sites. And she was doing it because she was trying to shift how school worked for a whole community. She wasn't thinking about her school. She's thinking about the community. And then her school is a community center, which is what we've talked about before. I loved it. I thought it was like,
well, and
all
it
over
seems
myself.
like what happened was they then kept opening up new sites for her.
Yeah.
Oh, more kids need you. More kids need this, as opposed to taking a step back and saying, how do we apply some of these approaches and learning to the traditional comprehensive high school?
That's the question. That's the
yes,
question.
but I would also maybe say that not all those traditional comprehensive high schools should be doing that. I mean, they should be adopting the mindset about kids. However, that personalized learning that's what makes the alternative high school experience special. Why a kid chooses to go to a large state university where there are 30,000 kids or a small liberal arts college that has 1,500 kids. There's the relation.
I think you're right. Here's what I want to say about the concept of it as a bellwether. You're talking about a mindset shift, not necessarily structurally.
Yeah.
And the mindset shift here and what you both defined, I thought this was a fun way to think about innovation. The word innovation was knowing students. Ninth grade on track, basically she's creating cohorts, she's creating families. And as probably listeners know, my work not started, but one of my large pieces of work was working with the Coalition of Essential Schools, which was basically funded by Gates to turn large comprehensive high schools into small autonomous schools or pathways or ninth grade cohorts, families, etc. And the whole point of this was adults knowing kids. That was the whole point. It worked really well.
One quote I would pull from exactly your statement and to reaffirm what she said is that high schools are designed almost for disconnection, not connection. And what she is advocating for is what you are pushing for in your small autonomous schools of breaking up these large comprehensive high schools into smaller families or communities or however centers or themes. She said, we put systems in place in high schools so that the kids are seen and known.
Exactly.
Yep.
Both of you described it as innovation. And the reason why I'm pulling it out here is that innovation isn't necessarily the thing you've never thought of, that no one knows. That it isn't always the new AI or whatever it is. It is innovative in a system that isn't prioritizing human connection with people to prioritize human connection with people. That is innovative merely because you're not doing it. And
I agree.
That I loved. Can I end on one more?
I'd love it.
That was really interesting in relation to her after action review. She said in shifting from the principal job that she had, which I can fully understand why or at least I think I know what that job was like. I didn't hold that job. She said, she basically said it was hard to do an after action review because she said, I always say there are no ninth grade success emergencies. It's not something where I'm in reactive mode almost ever. So it's really a different role. I had to regrow my prefrontal cortex to be able to really sit and think and plan and execute that plan. She just described why people need a coach, why principals need a coach. That the restructure, when you do the principal job, when you do this, I would assume.
Oh, no, you're right. From day one, you run in and it is like, you say putting out fires, but it is issue after issue and it is meeting the acute needs right there. I hate to say emergency room, whatever you want to call it, but it is like there's very little time to pause, to think, to plan, to reflect, right? I mean, again, this is why we do this podcast, is to give individuals an opportunity to pause and look back, sometimes on incidents and episodes of their life that they've never really unpacked truthfully or fully. And so I agree with you. This is a call for, she's in this position now to be able to really think and make suggestions or goal setting or institute a framework that really helps leaders. She says something about that schools just weren't set up to support the needs of kids. Right. And so as a unfortunate byproduct, it pushes kids out. And what you're advocating for is, this is how you pull them in, is by having someone who's ready to do that work. And they can't do that if they're just good thinkers, quick thinkers, and problem solvers only.
So I want to end on this idea. You shouldn't have to switch jobs to a whole new organization as a leader to do that. The fact that she had to then basically get her prefrontal cortex back means that she had spent so much time putting out fires it makes me think of what Dee and I love The Pit. I don't know if you've watched The Pit, listeners who watch The Pit. It is the equivalent as a principal. Here it's for in the ER. But as a school, it's just like that. It's constant, and you're changing constantly in terms of what you need to focus on and what you know about. You're never lingering on a particular challenge. And so to be able to execute a plan and to be thoughtful about it, you do need to take a pause. And you can't do it with that problem-solving brain. You have to slow down and reflect, because it's not a problem to solve usually in terms of, let's say, for example, the achievement as a very broad, obvious example. It's not a problem to solve. That is a dilemma to manage. The system is not set up to serve every kid. It was never set up that way. And so if what you want it to do is serve every kid, you're talking about a fundamental change of the entirety of the system. You can't do that with a problem-solving brain. It's too many problems. I end on that.
That's brilliant. Yeah. Yeah. It made me think of, and I was going to move into another direction of, this is why you look at the most high-performing organizations, they provide opportunities for sabbatical or a period of time where each week there is just time to sit, reflect, write.
Slow down.
We don't do that. We should.
No, we say go to summer. Everybody instantly gets sick on July 1. And they're sick for a solid 2 weeks.
Well, and if we're honest, they're also working summer school because...
Yeah, because they don't get paid enough.
That's right. Because in society, we've decided, you have the hardest job? Fantastic. We'll give you the lowest pay.
We'll also only pay you for 10 months. So the idea, like, you get summers off. I just want everybody to know, don't you realize that teachers aren't paid for 2 months?
They may divide it over 12.
They're not paid for it. They don't get it off. I mean, if you quit your job, aren't you off?
That's right. That's right. All right, listen, for those who are listening, we always want you to try to log into that Apple podcast piece and give us those 5 stars. And we'd like to know, what were you like in 9th grade? That would be nice. How about that?
Guess who's trying to do this? My mother has attempted to give us 5 stars more than once.
I know. It's not easy. That's why I'm really proud of the 90 people who've done it, because it's like nobody can
how to give us 5 stars. I love
know.
that my mama is trying.
Keep going. Inténtalo. All right, you've been listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. We'll see you next week, Jamie.
Yeah, see you next week, Peter.